Okay, welcome all to my library. Today we're going to have a review video over pronouns, so let me go ahead and pull that up for you. We will get rid of my ugly mug in just a second here, but of course I just wanted to wave hello to you, which kind of is weird with this virtual background, but know that I am waving in this fidgety Twitch stuff. Um, and we're going to go over some pronoun items that you struggled with last week and then have a bit of a preview of verbs, which you will be covering this week. So minimize I go. See you guys later. Let me hit present on this to get full screen. And away we go. Okay, so we are looking at pronouns, like I said. Obviously, with pronouns, there were a few things that I felt that we struggled with last week, but overall, I was very pleased with the results. Grades were great on it, but just a couple things that maybe you could use a little more help on, a couple questions that I could tell we struggled on the most, just to clear a few things up. Okay, so the first thing that several of you mentioned was the most difficult part that I wanted to make sure that I covered with you further was personal versus possessive pronouns. So a personal pronoun or personal pronouns, they are going to reference a specific person or thing. So if I'm talking about my dog, Jack loves to take naps, he is a sleepy dog. The pronoun he is in reference to a specific person or thing, in this case, my dog, Jack. So he would be drawn back to Jack. That makes it a personal pronoun. Or as a possessive pronoun is going to show ownership, right? It has to own something. It has to possess something within the sentence. So if I'm still using Jack as my subject, Jack loves his naps. Well, his is possessive because it is possessive of naps. I mean, technically I could put Jack loves Jack's naps, and I would have to have an apostrophe S on Jack, but using Jack twice in a row in the same sentence sounds very strange, which of course is why we use pronouns. So let's look at a couple examples. So Manny and John have their own version of what happened yesterday. So ask yourself this question when trying to decide if it's personal or it's possessive. Does there possess anything in this sentence? So we look at the sentence again. Manny and John have their own version of what happened yesterday. Well, yes, it does, of course, right? There is possessive of version. They have their own version, their version of the story. So because there is possessive of version, that means that I would mark possessive as the correct answer in this question. Now let's look at example 2. Mr. Ramirez showed us how to fix a flat tire on a motorcycle. So we ask ourselves the same question, right? Does us possess anything in this sentence? So we look at the sentence again. Mr. Ramirez showed us how to fix a flat tire on a motorcycle. No, right? Us is in reference to a group of people, but it's not showing ownership over any item within that sentence. Us doesn't own Mr. Ramirez, it doesn't own tire, and it doesn't own motorcycle. So since it's just in a reference to a group of people that has not yet been mentioned in the sentence, that means that it is a personal pronoun. All right, let's try a practice on our own. Give you a little trickier one just to see if your mind's sharp, to challenge you a little bit. So there are 2 pronouns in this sentence that we're looking at. None of the trash scattered in their yard is ours. So ask yourself, is there personal or is it possessive? And what about our? Is our personal or possessive? And of course, you're always asking yourself, do either of these pronouns, maybe one or both, possess anything in this sentence? I'll give you a couple seconds here to think about it. So let's take a look. So once again, the sentence was, none of the trash scattered in their yard is ours. Is their personal or possessive? It's possessive. How about our? Is our personal or possessive? It's also possessive. So if you answered possessive for both pronouns, you are correct. Now let's clear it up. What are these two pronouns possessive of? Their shows ownership over yard. It is their yard. Ours shows ownership over trash. Our trash. Even though they're not taking ownership over it, right? It's not technically their trash, but it's referencing back to the trash that's scattered in their yard. So then I drew it out in a picture here. So of course, their is possessive of yard, and ours is possessive of trash, right? So that's personal versus possessive. Ask yourself that one question. Is the pronoun or pronouns you're looking at showing ownership or possessing anything in the sentence? Okay, moving on. The second section that several of you asked questions about or said was the hardest part was reflexive versus intensive. So I can see why this one's a little bit tricky, but let me try to clear it up for you to give you a very clear method to make sure you're always answering these correctly. So if you're looking at a reflexive pronoun, it is always going to be in reference to the same person or thing that is involved in the sentence. If it's intensive, it's simply adding emphasis to a noun or another pronoun. But this is the big question that I want you to ask yourself. If I remove it, if you remove it, does the sentence still make sense and hold the same meaning? If you can remove that pronoun and it still is exactly the same piece of information, everything's exactly the same, you just removed emphasis, then the answer is intensive. That pronoun can be removed. It doesn't have to be there in order for it to make sense. If the answer is no, when I remove this pronoun, it doesn't make sense or it doesn't hold the same meaning, then the answer is reflexive. So read the sentence out loud, remove the pronoun, and see if it still makes sense or it has the same meaning. Simple as that. Let's try a couple practice problems. So first question. Marvin, why don't you attend the meeting and see for yourself? So we ask ourselves, is yourself reflexive or intensive? Well, just like I said, let's remove the pronoun. So I'll read it out loud. Marvin, why don't you attend the meeting and see for? Does that make sense? No. So since it doesn't make sense, yourself is reflexive. Let's look at problem 2. Arthur gave her the book himself. So we ask ourselves, is himself reflexive or intensive? Just like before, let's remove the pronoun. I'll say the sentence out loud. Arthur gave her the book. Well, does that sentence still make sense? Yeah, that still makes sense. Arthur gave her the book is still a complete sentence. Does it have the same meaning? We still know that Arthur is giving her the book, so when you remove himself, it still holds the same meaning as well. So we can remove that word, and it's the exact same sentence with the exact same meaning. All himself is doing is adding emphasis. So himself in this sentence is an intensive pronoun. Makes sense? Okay, let's look at a practice problem that you'll do on your own. So the sentence is, I rented myself a 3-wheeler for the weekend. Is myself reflexive or intensive? Now again, ask yourself, if I remove myself from the sentence, does it still make sense? And does it hold the same meaning? I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it. Okay, so this one, I'll admit, was a little bit tricky. So let's remove myself from the sentence first. If I remove myself and I read it out loud, it reads, I rented a three-wheeler for the weekend. Does that sentence still make sense? Yes, it does. I 100% could say I rented a three-wheeler for the weekend. That's a complete sentence. That makes sense. But does it hold the same meaning? No, it doesn't, right? When I say I rented myself a three-wheeler for the weekend, it's very clear to the reader. They know who the three-wheeler was rented for. He's renting it for himself. I rented myself a three-wheeler. When you take myself out of the equation, you take it out of the sentence, we no longer know who the three-wheeler is being rented for. So since removing myself from the sentence changes the meaning, it makes it reflexive. Make sense? So if you answered reflexive to that question, you are correct. Make sure you take the time to remove that pronoun. Even if the sentence still makes sense, always double check to make sure that it has the same meaning. Okay, that's reflexive versus intensive. Last thing I want to look at is a preview of verbs. So remember, a verb expresses action or a state of being, and it is necessary to make a statement. So in order to make a statement, have a sentence, there has to be a verb. Today, you're going to look at intransitive versus transitive verbs, linking versus action verbs, and verb phrases. Now, I found a really great resource that was suggested to me by a fellow colleague from a different school. Khan Academy has some really great videos over grammar. So I've included those both for the past weeks for you to go back and look at, as well for the future weeks and this week. Take a look at those videos if you are confused. I've still included the same instruction in written form as I have the past couple weeks. But if you have further questions about verbs themselves or certain types of verbs, take a look at those videos, and I think it will really help you clear up a few of the questions that maybe will make the assignment easier. And then, of course, in your Flipgrid video this week, you'll tell me what part of the assignment was the most difficult, and I'll make a review video just like I've done for nouns and for pronouns. But as always, follow the instructions. It's self-grading. Make sure you check your spelling for me. Some of you are losing points because of that. So make sure that you're spelling the words properly to get full points. Take your time and do the best that you can do. Alrighty, I will stop sharing my screen just a second here so you can see me in my library. That's not real, virtual background. All right, thanks guys. As always, email me if you have any questions, but have a great week and enjoy learning more about verbs.